Ben Smith, joined by my co-host Jeff Metzger. Before introducing our guest, we want to thank Feel for the Game for providing the platform to have all these presentations live and available for replay. You can check out all their resources over at feelforthegame.com. Now it is my pleasure to introduce Noel Emenhiser, head coach, Madonna men's basketball. He attended Woodland High School in Woodburn, Indiana, in the class of 2001, graduated from Madonna in the class of 2006 with a bachelor's degree in mathematics. As a player, he was a three-time All-American honorable mention, two-time All-Conference first team, two-time All-Conference All-Academic selection, two-time Daktronics Scholar athlete. As a freshman, he led the team in scoring. He's a career scoring leader with 2,213 points. And in 2012, he was the first men's basketball player inducted into the Madonna Hall of Fame. As a coach, he got his start in 2006 with the Sporting Club of Braga, pro league in Portugal. In 2008, he returned to Madonna as an assistant coach, and he became the head coach in 2009. He has the most career wins with 159. He has coached 21 all-conference selections, 5 All-Americans, 27 all-academic selections, 14 Daktronics Scholar athletes, 2 conference newcomers of the year, 1 conference player of the year, and in 2018 and 19, he was the conference coach of the year, and he's also a 2-time conference coach of character. I know we're going to talk about coaching performance today, but I want to give Noel a chance to kind of talk about his experiences along the way and how he got to where he is today. Thank you, Noel.
Well, thank you guys for having me. It's truly an honor to get to spend a little bit of time with coaches who are interested in improving themselves and improving their ability to lead. It's something that I'm really passionate about, and I think a lot of my experiences, throughout basketball, both as a player and as a coach, have driven, that desire to improve. It's funny that you mentioned many of those things. I've got to believe that I'm one of the all-time losingest basketball players to ever continue on through the sport. My junior year of high school at Woodland was a rough year. I think we lost every game. We were 0-20, and the following year, I think we won 5 games. So there weren't a lot of opportunities for me to continue to play, but I developed a great relationship with a legendary coach up here in the Detroit metropolitan area named Bernie Holowicki. He was a long-time high school coach, legendary, 3rd all-time winningest coach in the state of Michigan. But in his twilight, he took over at Madonna University, and we built a great relationship, and I was able to come and play for him for 3 years until health pushed him away from the game. But even at Madonna on the court, we didn't have much team success. So to get the opportunity to return as a coach was somewhat unlikely. And, even in the first several years, we didn't have a whole lot of success on the court either. And so from all that failure, if you will, really able to learn and develop some internal characteristics that I think have now allowed us to turn the page and to become more of a successful and consistent program. And for myself personally, to develop, a mindset that allows me to not only coach, but to do a lot of other things in my life and to keep things, in the proper priorities. And so what I'd like to share about today is my personal journey of identifying what I believe is truly important and where coaching fits into that. Not to suggest that I know what's best for each and every person that could be listening or for yourself individually, but more that there's a process to finding our very best. And so as coaches all the time, I think we're searching for how to increase our players' performance. How can we improve their speed? How can we improve their strength? How can we improve their understanding and their decision-making? I also think we must be doing the same thing for ourselves as coaches. So how do we improve our performance, our consistency, our ability to be the leader that our group can model, that our group can follow, that our group can trust in? And so, over the course of the last several years, these are principles that I've tried to develop and learn and pursue, understanding that at no point are these ever finished. And while I think I'm on the right path in certain areas, and I'm sure many of you are the same, that there's always room for improvement. And so that's kind of where I'd love to jump off and begin talking about coaching performance. And what I'll try to do here is share my screen. So hopefully everybody can see that okay.
Yep, it looks good so far. I think
All
we're
right.
good.
So kind of dive into this idea of improving our own performance as coaches. And so to get a starting point, I think we have to almost identify, what does high performance look like? If we're thinking of our players, we'd probably want them to be better, faster, more efficient, more consistent, either than what they previously were, or even potentially better than their opponent. And so as a coach, I think for us to seek high performance, it's not necessarily against our opponent, but higher performance than what we previously were. So that little bit of improvement that can allow for our organization, our team to benefit from our leadership. So to me, we're going to talk about this in two different categories: 5 pursuits of a high performance leader, and then 5 habits. The pursuits, I think are never finished. I think that the things that we have to continually work at, and they're not, many of them are not easy, but we'll kind of go down that wormhole for a second. The first pursuit, I think you got to dream big. As a leader, we have to set a clear vision for our organization. And while I think that benefits the group, it also gives us individually direction on our actions and on our decisions. Where do we start? What do we need to do? The next thing in is to burn your goals, to really define your commitments, even more so committed to the process of achieving that dream. And the next section would be, non-attachment, and understanding that what we do is not who we are. Prioritization, make sure that we understand what's important in our own lives, and this could be different for every single one of us. But to make sure that we're doing what's important before we do what we would consider urgent. And then finally, to take ownership. If you are the leader of a group, of an organization, of a team, the head coach, there really can't be anybody else that can take responsibility when things go wrong. It has to start and end with us. So as we go through each one of those individual sections, we'll try to really kind of be specific. So to set a clear vision. As the leader of an organization, we have to create and share a really clear vision for what we expect of our team and organization. What do we want to see accomplished? And then once the team staff is on the same page, it guides our decision-making and our effort, and it points us, to really check each and everything that we're doing and say, does that match with what we say we're trying to do and what we're trying to accomplish? And I'm a big believer that you need a timeline. I think every one of us that's in coaching would say, I want to win a championship, whether that's a conference championship, a state championship at the high school level, national championship as coaches. But until you establish an exact timeline for when you expect to do that, you can create a lot of excuses for yourself. Here at Madonna, we're under-resourced. We don't have the scholarships that some of our competition does. We don't have the facilities that many teams that we're competing against does. So until we set an exact timeline for when we expect to do it, we can allow those excuses to take root and keep us from making the decisions and finding the creative and entrepreneurial ways around those issues and those problems that we have to find. And so, we'll try to mix in some quotes as we go along. This one's not attributed to any one person, but when we're starting out on an endeavor, I think most of the time we overestimate how hard it's going to be, and we underestimate how long it's going to take. So, a lot of us probably have made a commitment to maybe getting in better shape over the quarantine, and so we give it a great go for a couple days or a week. We go really hard, and then we're discouraged whenever we don't see the immediate results. What's really required for us to get to where we say we want to go is the consistency over time. It's not going to be as hard as we think, but it's going to take much longer. And so, I think even us as coaches will, underestimate the amount of time it's going to take us to get home from the office, from the gym, rather than be realistic about, the time it's going to take to actually do something meaningful. When the Warriors' current majority owner, Joe Lacob, took over, he set really crystal clear expectations for what he wanted of that organization. And a quote that's attributed to his son, Kurt, who is an assistant general manager for the program, for the team, in the book, Victory Machine, really stuck out to me. And he's speaking of his father, Joe. if you believe in something fervently enough, there's a chance it's going to happen. If you don't, you're never going to have the intestinal fortitude to make those things happen. You know, it's the idea of the LeVar Ball idea that you speak things into existence. So I think you got to create a clear and present vision, you know, present a dream to the group that you're working with and give it a timeline, but not necessarily, you know, make it as public as somebody like LeVar might do. I don't think that merely saying it makes it come true. I think, you know, putting yourself out there and making a daring commitment then forces you into action. And so 3 years ago, you know, our basketball program here at Madonna was in a poor spot. You know, we won 11 games. We missed the conference tournament for the first time in program history. We had a locker room that was divided. Myself as a coach, I was doing things completely wrong. 4 years prior to that, we had won a conference tournament title. We built a program that I thought was really based on the right things. And after that time, in around 2013, you know, I made a concerted effort as a coach that if we had gotten to the point where we could win a conference tournament title in 2013, by focusing on the process, by doing things to build a program and a culture, you know, I remember thinking, what would we be capable of doing if I really focused on results? If I put the emphasis on winning, you know, if we got to this point without focusing on winning, what will we be able to do if we really truly focus on results and we hold players accountable to their productivity rather than just this building a culture idea? And so for the next 4 years, while that kind of philosophy was in place, you know, our team struggled. And the more that I pushed the players, the harder that I held them accountable to success, the more and more they blamed each other. And it was only natural because I was putting the emphasis on their productivity and I was blaming them when things didn't go wrong. And so, you know, at the end of the 2016-17 season, you know, I was beginning to recognize, you know, all the errors that I was making as the leader of our group. And so we went into our team meeting at the end of that season. And you can see the picture here. We, at that time, Down University had actual chalkboards. So we scrounged up a piece of yellow chalk and we made a bold statement that said that we're going to fix the issues in our program, that we're going to have a culture committed to winning, that we're going to dedicate ourselves to doing what's necessary to create the opportunity to win a WAC title before April of 2020. And so that was the first step in the change in our program, was first stating a vision of where it is that we wanted to go. The next thing to us was to burn our goals. And what we wanted to do was replace the word goal with a dream. And defining a dream meant, you know, that's a cherished aspiration, ambition, or ideal. But it's important to recognize that we don't hold complete control over the outcome of a dream. So the picture that we placed before, you know, we have 10 other teams in our league that want the exact same thing as us. We have, you know, potential for injuries. We have referees that could impact the outcome of a game. And so we really, truly recognize the fact that we don't have complete control over the outcome. We can't force our dream to come true. But by stating that that was what we intended to do, it forced us into action. It forced us to overcome the excuses that we'd been holding on to, the reasons that we said that we couldn't in the past, and start to make decisions and changes based on the direction that we said we were going. Now, going into that meeting, that was a really uncomfortable thing, you know, very vulnerable to say, like, this is what we are going to do. How can you possibly make that kind of a promise or make that kind of a statement? And we didn't know. We didn't know what we needed to do. We didn't know what was going to happen. Quite frankly, wasn't sure that we could make it come true. But the very next day, our coaching staff met, and each one of us came up with a list of commitments, things that we individually had to do to make that a possibility. So the first thing was defining our dreams so that we have a starting point for our commitments. Where do we want to go? What do we want to say our program is going to be about? And then looking very closely at what do I personally need to do today and each day hereafter that will make my dream as certain as possible. You know, what's going to make this a reality? And we created a list of commitments. So the rules for commitments, you know, they've got to be 100% realistic. If you say you're going to watch 7 hours of film a day, and you have another job or you have a family, like that's going to be a stretch. You're going to watch film for 7 hours. You're going to read for 3 hours. You know, they've got to be realistic, and they've got to be 100% within your control. So, you know, a commitment to land for me, a commitment to land a recruit or something like that is outside of my control. And then I got to be able to complete this list, each one commitment on the list each day. And I got to put it in a very highly visible place, and where we're going to see it often, where I'm going to be reminded that I need to do these things. And if I'm not, it's going to be, you know, very visible for myself. And then I got to give myself permission to regularly revisit and adjust or amend that list of commitments. So if what I believed on the day after that meeting was that I needed to do certain things, but as I learn more that I need to add something to or remove because it just wasn't going to be a valuable use of my time, I got to give myself the permission to constantly adjust or amend that list of commitments that I can create. So this is a screenshot from, you know, the screensaver of my phone. And I know you may not be able to read those well, but I'll show a list of some of the commitments in just a moment. So this a highly visible place. Every time I picked up my phone, I was going to see the list of commitments that I had created. And I tried to encompass every single aspect of my life that was going to contribute to this dream, this goal. Okay. And here's a little bit more detailed list of them. I won't go through each and every one, but it started with a mission. And the purpose of these commitments was to create and maintain, you know, a program capable of winning a conference championship by 2020. And that was going to include my health, my fitness, you know, how am I going to prioritize my family? How am I going to improve my mental capacity? What was I going to do, and how was I going to treat my staff? What was I going to do with my team? You know, what could I do specifically to improve myself as a coach in terms of my studying film, reading? How was I going to practice my faith as a part of, you know, my everyday life? How was I going to build my team by reaching out to a coach? And how was I going to attract people to believe in our program? By being a resource, by sharing as much as possible with whoever possible to amplify, you know, our abilities and our reach. So with a list of commitments, we began down a path toward, you know, a brighter future. You know, we went from 11 wins in 2016-17. We recruited a really good class that helped change the culture. Our coaching staff did a wonderful job of making adjustments. The next year we moved, you know, to 18 wins. The following year to 23 wins. But things that we've learned along the way, myself included, that have allowed to put myself in the best position to be what I need to be for our team to be successful and for our players to be successful. The idea of non-attachment. I'm really enjoying The Last Dance being aired right now. I was a big fan of Michael Jordan and the Bulls. And as I grew in the game, somebody that I've really studied and admired is Phil Jackson. And some early readings of his books, Sacred Hoops, 11 Rings, have led to other books that have really shaped my understanding of the best possible way for myself to coach. And one of the ideas that I've really worked hard at, and this is a difficult one, is this idea of non-attachment, by not allowing my identity to come from something that could be taken away. So I don't consider myself a coach. I don't consider myself you know, a former player or any accolade that any person may have given me at any time. I realized that I could lose my job tomorrow. You've seen it in our society where coaches lose a job for inaction or for no reason at all, or a school gets closed or something like that. And so I've tried to remove myself from being a coach or a winning coach or a losing coach. And I'm just a person, just another, you know, guy like anybody else out there. I'm lucky that my job is coaching, but it's really not who I am. And I try not to allow my value to come from something that I don't have control over. So, you know, as a coach, it's pretty easy to feel valuable after a win. I can distinctly remember a lot of times in my career, and it's still hard to fight this today, but you win a game, the next day you walk around campus, head up, shoulders back, make a couple extra laps through the common areas. And then after that embarrassing loss or, you know, blowout on the road, you just hide in your office for the day. You don't want to see anybody. You really believe that everybody else sees your value from what you do, but it's just not the case. The truth is, the secretary in our athletic department, our athletic trainers, the students, the workers at the school, they don't really care if we won the game the night before or not, but they do care how I treat them. If I hold the door for them, if I say hello, thank you, that means way more to them than if we happen to win a game the night before. And so trying to remove myself from the identity of what I do and trying to remove my value from, what is happening has really changed my perspective on a lot of things and allowed me to be more consistent, allowed me to treat other people the way that they probably deserve to be treated, regardless of the circumstances going on with our particular basketball team. Reading some of Phil Jackson's stuff, he's obviously credited as being the Zen master, but he always, in his book, Sacred Hoops, he always referenced a book called Zen Mind, Beginner's Mind. And so after he referenced it over and over, I said, I gotta see what he's talking about. And this quote, really stands out and I think helps define what non-attachment means, that we should forget day by day what we have done. That's true non-attachment. And what we should do is something new. And to do something new, of course, we should know what we've done, but we should not keep holding on to it. That we should only reflect on it and start over each and every day. The things that we have don't define us. The things that we do don't define us, but just allowing ourselves to be present in the moment, and not necessarily measuring ourselves by, either accomplishments or by possessions. I think it's an important concept. It's a difficult one for me to grasp even, but it's something that I'm working towards. And this is a quote directly from Phil Jackson. Forget the ring. Obsessing about winning is a loser's game. Create the best possible conditions for success and then let go of the outcome. And I think what all of us are trying to do as coaches is to create an atmosphere within our group and our team that the players can succeed. And for many years, I was doing that the wrong way. I thought that pressure and fear and high levels of accountability for results was going to be the way to create those conditions for success. But I was absolutely wrong. By letting go of the outcome of a game, we allow our players to be more free, to play, to be the best version of themselves. If a player is afraid of being blamed for, making a shot or taking a shot or making a mistake, they're going to play tense. They're going to play reluctant. They're going to play avoiding a consequence rather than being the most free and best version of themselves. And the same thing's true of us as coaches. I know we've all felt that tightness in our chest when a game's close or there's a team that we're supposed to have beaten that's got us down 10 with 3 minutes to go. But if we're more focused on the moment and doing what it is that we can do to help our team to be successful instead of the outcome, we all have a better chance for success. And if we allow our players to focus on the process of being a great team and a great player, they're more likely to be that than if they're constantly concerned about making or missing a shot or the outcome of a game or winning or not winning a championship. So, by allowing ourselves as coaches to disconnect from the results and the identity of coaching, we're allowing ourselves to do the right thing, to treat our players the way they deserve to be treated, and to act from a place of authenticity. Every great coach that you've ever heard discuss themselves, they always talk about being authentic. There's a great podcast right now with Steve Kerr and Pete Carroll where they talk about, just authentic, how important it is to have values that are true to yourself and not values that are, stolen from, another successful coach. And they talk about, the phenomenon that when Syracuse makes a deep run into the NCAA tournament the next year, everybody's running the 2-3 zone. Well, the 2-3 zone is the same for Syracuse every single year, but their success creates copycats. And so true authenticity is taking an idea from each and every different coach and then organizing it in a way that's original to yourself. So us as coaches, we have to be authentic and we have to allow, our own ideas and personality to shine through in the way that our team plays. In addition, by investing 100% into the process of success and focusing on what we can control, I think we create the best possible conditions for success. And by allowing our players the ability to focus on the moment and not the outcome of a shot, of a play, of a game, we're allowing them the opportunity to play in a space void of pressure. If a player is concerned about what the coach is going to do to criticize them after a loss, they're less likely to play and to be in the moment. And so when you listen to interviews about Phil Jackson's teams, they always talk about being in the moment, about letting the game come to themselves, about not worrying about the particular outcome or the result. And I think that's a really beautiful philosophy for the game of basketball. So then the next pursuit, if we talked about creating a vision and setting a dream for your program, writing down your commitments, the step-by-step things that it's going to take daily to achieve your vision, creating this idea of non-attachment, of letting go of the results, to focus on the process as opposed to the outcomes. I think the next thing that we have to do as coaches is really establish our own priorities. So we have to do what's important before we do what's urgent. I know for myself, there's countless days where I feel like I've got to get this film cut, I've got to get this scouting report typed up, I've got to get this recruit call, and I've got to get these things done that are going to, because we play tonight, or because we need this player, or whatever the case. And so for us as coaches, it's really easy to ignore the things that are important. Our personal health, our families, our relationship with our wife or our children. And I don't want to impose upon any of you that you may be doing that, but I know I was doing that. So while our program was struggling, I felt like, all I really need to do is get the program back on track. And then I can pay attention to my health. And then I can pay attention to the relationship with my wife. And then I can, give my kids more time. But right now, the team really needs me. And what I had to do was take a step back from that. And I think for most of us, and myself included, we don't really take action until we're in danger of losing something, right? So, you work to fix a situation whenever it's apparent that it's nearly gone. So you have to ask yourself, what do you value? If I could have more of something, what would that be? And a lot of us, the easy answer is money and winning and acclaim, and some of those things might be what we think we value. But when we look back on our lives, I estimate we're going to value time. What do we wish we could have more? I think we wish we could have more time. I bet we wish we could have more quality of life. And so are we being proactive as coaches to prioritize those things now in our lives, as opposed to looking back in the rearview mirror? And I think there's a difference between what we value, what we'd like more of, and what we believe is important. So if we had to determine what was important to us, that would be like making us choose between two things. If I had to choose between my coaching job and my wife, I'm going to choose my wife 100% every single time that I'm imposed with that question. If I had to choose between my job as a coach and my relationship with my children, I'm going to choose my children. But do our actions back up that statement? And for a long time, my actions did not back that statement up. I would have said that as the answer, but that wouldn't have been necessarily true. I was putting, my work, my team, the outcome of a game ahead of the relationships that I want to hold most important. So I had to reprioritize my life. And it took a lot of learning and self-evaluation, and, great book on some of these concepts is Greg McEwen's Essentialism. If you don't prioritize your life, someone else will. C.S. Lewis says, when you put first things first, it's not to neglect second things. It does not take away from them. It increases them. And so by prioritizing our life as to what really should come first, I think the fear is that it's going to negatively impact our basketball team if I put my relationship with my wife first. That's really not the case. It's only going to amplify your ability to do your job if things are right at home. So when we talk about improving our coaching production, our coaching performance, we've got to really take care of our priorities in the right order. Otherwise, if things at home aren't working right, it's going to add a whole nother level of complication to, what you're trying to do in your professional and in your coaching life. I really, truly don't believe that we're going to, it's not until you believe you're going to lose something that you decide to fight for it. So all along, for myself, I really felt like my wife and children will be there while I figure out things with our team. They'll wait for me. And that really wasn't the case. I didn't really recognize it, but over time I started to notice, and my wife and I, we just weren't in a good place. We were going separate directions. And a lot of it was because of, the way that I was approaching our relationship. I wasn't invested in it. I was not prioritizing it. The priority clearly by my actions was our team, and that was failing too. So it took a lot of work and reorganization of our lives to put these things in priorities. And it's important to recognize that our priorities will not be expressed in the time we spend, but rather by our actions and intention. So when we talk about my list of priorities that I currently hold, I'm not spending more time with my family on certain days than I am with our team, but that time that I spend with them has to be intentional, has to be purposeful. And then my actions and decisions have to reflect that as a priority when I'm with other people. So, for each of us, we have to decide how we want to live and what you could not live without. So until I had to imagine myself without my family, it really truly wasn't a priority. So these are my priorities now. And again, they're not expressed in time, but they have to be expressed in my action and my intention. So my faith, and that's got to be present in every single thing that I do. So if I had a private conversation, with a buddy or in a group chat, is my faith being represented in the way that I choose to treat other people? Is it being, in the way that I talk? Is it being represented there? My family, my wife and children, is my time with them intentional? So if I only have an hour with them in the morning before we're going to go, on a 2-day road trip, is my time with them present, or am I on my phone? Am I taking that time to make a lunch? To write a note to put in their lunchbox, to make a coffee for my wife? Am I present in that time? And then when I'm away, does my wife know that she's the priority based on my actions and words? So not just when I'm with her, not just what I say to her over text. Is she a priority to me in the way that I treat each and every other person that I come into contact with? And do my children know that they're my priority based on how I treat my wife? Is that relationship important? Because I understand that that's going to impact, our relationship is going to impact, our children. And so does winning or losing a game affect how I treat them? In an ideal world, my kids would never know if we won or lost by how I act. Now, I'll be the first to tell you that is not the case. We lose a game that we weren't supposed to lose, and I have to fight extremely hard to be the dad that I'm supposed to be. And there's no doubt if we win a big game, the smile is not going to be hidden. It's going to bubble out of me. And so, that is something that's really, really difficult to do. And so, after those two things, am I really trying to serve other people? Is everything that I do in service of others, to the students of Madonna, to the coaches on our staff, to the young men on our team, to each person that I pass in the hallway? Can I leave each person that I interact with somehow in a better way, whether it's by saying hello or holding a door or picking up a piece of trash that somebody else may not have done that, or put a grocery cart away? How am I serving others in each and every action of my day? And so the next priority for me is an acquisition of knowledge. If I'm serious about these other priorities, then I have to seek knowledge that will increase my ability to improve in each area. How do I trade in, time wasted for time improving? Drive time to and from work, I can listen to podcasts, and instead of TV and entertainment, I can read. And by doing those things, it increases my ability to execute my faith, to prioritize my family, my wife, my children. It improves my ability to be there to meet the needs of somebody that I may come into contact with. Maybe it's one of my players that's struggling with something in their personal life. If I'm not equipped to serve them on that day, maybe I won't be able to help them in the way that I should have been capable of. Too busy is a myth. People make time for the things that are really important to them. So, I love the John Beeline quote about practice, that you can do anything you want in practice, but you can't do everything that you want. Because I think that really translates into our lives. We can do anything that we want with our lives. Everything's a choice, but we can't do everything that we want. And so we have to pick and choose what's essential and what's important. We have to make the decisions for ourselves that are going to eliminate future decisions. I love the story of John Harbaugh. He wears the same clothes every single day. I'm sorry, Jim Harbaugh at Michigan. He wears the same clothes every day because he doesn't want to think about what he's going to wear. It's just a way of reducing some of the clutter and making a decision that's going to allow for easier decision making in the future. And we can do the same thing in our lives. Prioritize, determine what's essential, eliminate the waste, and we really find that there's a lot more time than we even believed there was in the past. I think the final pursuit of us, for a highly productive, for a high-performing leader, is to take extreme ownership while remaining humble. So I want to reiterate that each and every one of these that we're talking about, I like to call them pursuits because I don't have these mastered. I'm constantly working to improve in these areas, and there is no finish line. But for me, the definition of ownership is never allowing another person to take responsibility for the group that I lead's failure. So if our team fails, I'm not going to let anybody else take responsibility for that. I'm not going to let the referees take responsibility. I'm not going to let our best player take responsibility for that. Now, they may still do that in their own right, but I'm never going to point to them as the reason that we failed. It's got to be my fault. If I didn't recruit the right players, if I didn't have the right offense, defense installed, if I didn't have those players in the right position, if I didn't call the right play, make the right substitution, then who else could there be to blame for that? And obviously there's all kinds of reasons we could blame somebody else. The ref made a bad call, so-and-so had a sprained ankle. But by not allowing those excuses to take root, it forces me to try to improve to the point that I'm capable of leading that group the way that they need to be led. At the same exact time that I display ownership, I believe that we have to display humility. And humility is for when things go right. Never take credit for what the group has accomplished. So, when things go wrong, it's my fault. When things go right, the players played great. The assistant coaches made unbelievable recommendations. Even the referees weren't that bad tonight. And so I think for us to be high-performing leaders, high-performing coaches, we have to balance ownership and we have to balance humility and always absorb the blame while never accepting the credit. When credit comes your way, give it away. And that's something that I think by doing it as coaches, our players see this and model it. I couldn't tell you how many times that somebody shared with me a post-game interview of one of our players this year where, our star player had 30-something points, and his whole interview, he talked about his teammates. When praise came his way, he gave it away. And so by us as coaches modeling that, our players adapt to it. And then throughout the year, if we lost, I was the first one to take responsibility, but then our players did as well. They weren't saying, yeah, coach is right, it's his fault. They would look and say, like, what could have I done better? And so I think that that's the best way that our organization can be successful is if we model genuinely, authentically taking extreme ownership. Your players are smart. They're going to know if you are saying these things just so that it looks like you're taking responsibility. And they're going to know if you're trying to give away credit in the hopes that you get it back. This is hard to develop. It's really difficult for myself, but that's an important area that we have to grow as coaches is to take ownership and leadership, ownership of failure and give away, credit when things come that way. The productivity of your group will be directly related to how safe they feel in the environment we create for them. If we create an environment where they can try, where they can fail, where they can get up again, and they can say, oh, I almost had it, then they're going to succeed. They're going to grow. By removing blame and taking ownership, leaders will recognize it's our responsibility to train, develop, and make sure that each person is the optimal position for success. If the referees lost us the last game, that's going to keep me from improving until the next game because it wasn't my fault. If I look in the mirror and say, what could have I done differently? Now I've got a better chance to be more prepared for the next scenario, the next time we come into that situation. And so taking ownership starts the process of growing and learning for the next opportunity that comes along. So we'll kind of change directions now. The 5 habits of a high performance leader. So what things do we need to include in our day-to-day life that's going to have us best prepared for success? When we talk about the habits of a highly successful player, those are pretty easy to identify. But what habits as coaches can we implement and work toward that are going to allow us to be at our best on a day-to-day basis? Better, more consistent, better attributes. And I think that these are things that I've worked really hard toward, and again, not mastered in any way, make mistakes all the time, that have increased my ability to be a more consistent leader. Diet and nutrition, we'll talk about the idea of a flywheel in just a little bit. Diet and nutrition is number one on my flywheel of things that when I do this, other things become easier. I think it's important for us to recognize that health is wealth. A lot of people spend their whole life chasing money, and then as they get older, they're spending the money trying to get their health back, trying to buy more time in their life. It really wasn't until my brother-in-law, so my wife's sister's husband, was rapidly declining with a brain tumor, that I started to recognize the importance of health. He's 1 year younger than me. 2 years ago, he passed away from an inoperable brain tumor. And it forced me to look at things that I can do to influence my own health. Now, he was at no fault in the situation, terrible circumstances, brain tumor that just, was not able to be corrected. But, that situation forced me to look at what things can I do for my own personal life and for our family that are going to reduce the risks of something like that happening to me, to happen to our family. And so, it really, no amount of money could replace our health. And I think that is one measure of truly being a wealthy person. And I feel, very lucky that our family's in that position right now, that we're all very healthy. But then the next aspect of that is food is medicine. The number one influence on our health is our environment, the things that are inputted into our body in terms of what we eat and what we drink. Food is medicine. So, and that's a medicine that we take before we see the doctor. I'm in no way advocating that we don't need the expertise of our medical profession. They're obviously invaluable. But if we're being honest, our medical system is set up to treat problems and not prevent them. So we have to take an individual responsibility to protect our health. How many of us could take 4 or 5 days off with the flu in the middle of the basketball season? How many of us would our practice would suffer if we didn't feel good that day? And so, our health is very important to the consistency of our ability to lead. Each one of us is an N of one. We're all different. There's no blanket statement for the best diet, for the best plan. What I do works for me at this point, and I'm going to continue to evolve it. But that may not work for you. So each one of us is in some ways required to seek out the best possible information and try on ourselves. How did I feel when I ate these certain things for this amount of time? How did I feel when I ate these certain things? And how can I then organize my life and my diet so that I can be the best possible version of myself? So I think it's important that all of us recognize, and if anything, I understand that most of us won't change until we feel like we have to. But if there's one thing that could come of this today, it'd be that each one of us take a responsibility for our own health, for our own lives, for recognition that this is a really important aspect, not only of our family and our future, but also, of our ability to be the best possible coach that we can be on a day-to-day basis. So these are my general recommendations. Over 3 years, I've studied 2 major areas. One is leadership. I love reading about leadership. I love reading about why teams succeed and why teams fail. And the second is nutrition. So my brother-in-law's situation opened my eyes to a whole world of nutrition and diet that I was completely unaware of. We'd always been taught the food pyramid and the guidelines, but until you understand how those came about and why they're probably so wrong, I found this whole other world of nutrition that not only impacts myself, but how we approach our team, how we approach our own family and what we eat. And so if I boiled that all down into a few bullet points, this is what I think works for most people. And this is what I try to follow myself. Try to get 1 gram of protein a day for my ideal body weight. So if you're trying to gain weight, you're going to be wanting to eat protein above and beyond your current weight. So thinking of your players, you guys may have some young players that are trying to put on some extra muscle. They've got to be eating more protein than they currently weigh. 4 years ago, I was 40 pounds heavier than I am right now. I needed to be eating less than my body weight in protein to get to that ideal point. For myself, the process kind of went like this. Once I recognized that I was eating the wrong way, late nights of film were answered in the morning on my drive to work, stopping for a donut and a Mountain Dew, and then just the constant sugar cravings throughout the day. So the first thing that I did was reduce and remove sugar, starting with what I drank and then from the foods that I was eating. And it was amazing how fast I started to feel more energetic, consistency throughout my mood. So once I felt that difference, I said, what else can I do? And then it was reduce and remove highly processed foods, breads, chips, cookies, pizzas, pastas, these really high energy foods that deliver very few nutrients. And then, the more that I learned, what's next? What else can I do? How else can I take the next step toward improvement? It was to reduce and remove foods with vegetable oils. The story behind that's a long one, but vegetable oils, soybean oil, canola oil are cheap and expensive fillers in foods that are highly carcinogenic. They can cause cancer. They can cause mitochondrial damage. It's just generally not good for us. But you're going to see that those things are in almost all highly processed foods. And then, especially during the periods where you're in a position where you're wanting to reduce weight, reduce your eating window. Intermittent fasting, our bodies do wonderful things and wonderful healing when we're not trying to digest or store food. But, great resources on that. There's some wonderful books. Peak by Dr. Mark Bubbs. Deep Nutrition by Kate Shanahan is a wonderful. She was the head nutritionist for the LA Lakers in the 2005 to 2012. Worked with Kobe and a lot of the guys. Dwight Howard. You look at him right now; he's nearly 40 years old. He follows that diet, and if you've seen him, he's a physical specimen. So it's a very natural way of eating. Real foods. Starting with meat, and followed up with other whole foods, plants, fruits. The benefits that I've noticed from an improved diet, much better energy, not reliant on the constant sugar bumps and things like that. Improved immunity. I knock on wood, I know that this isn't a guarantee, but I couldn't tell you the last time that I've had a cold or the flu. Mood consistency, our players' mood and practice is going to be dependent upon our mood. And so, if we feel good every day, if we have a little more self-confidence, less irritability, I think that's going to make a difference on our players and how they approach practice and how they approach us as coaches. Next topic, sleep. And as coaches, it's almost a badge of honor to say that we don't sleep much, that we don't that we're grinding all night, that we're watching that extra game, that we're breaking down more and more film. And that's certainly what I found myself doing, especially when our team was bad. I was spending less time connecting, with my family and my wife and more time watching film. But this study is really interesting, especially as it relates to players. Dr. Cheryl Ma studied the Stanford men's basketball team in 2011. She had 11 players volunteer, and she tracked their sleep and performance over the course of the season that year. At the beginning of the season, those 11 players were sleeping about 6.6 hours. By the end of the season, they were sleeping 8.5 hours per night. Now, this was not in-game percentages that they tracked. This was post-practice line drill, free throw drill, and a three-point shooting drill. So understand the context where these numbers are. They didn't improve somebody's in-game field goal percentage by this amount. It was in a shooting drill. But regardless, I think that this still is telling that sleep is an important factor in our players' performance and in our performance as coaches. those players increase their speed by 5%, their free throw percentage by 9%, their 3-point percentage by 9.2%. So the first thing that I would tell you as coaches is get your sleep. And then you're going to tell your players, get your sleep, because it's going to make a difference on how you feel going into that game. Jeff Bezos, the Amazon founder, CEO, estimate that he makes 20% better decisions on 8 hours of sleep compared to 6 hours. The quality of your life ultimately depends on the quality of your decisions. If we make 20% better decisions by sleeping 8 hours compared to 6, and the quality of our life depends on the quality of our decisions, that is a really important step that we have to take. I mean, think of the number of decisions that we have to make throughout a practice. How am I going to react to this situation when a player does this? How am I going to react in a game when this certain things happens with a referee? What decision am I going to make on substitution? What play am I going to call? What am I going to say in this timeout? How am I going to react? And if our decisions are 20% better as a result of getting the proper amount of sleep, that's going to compound over time, and it's going to directly impact your ability to be the coach that you want. You know, being a father of 3, I did not realize how sleep deprived I was when our children were young until I started sleeping again. And I really felt like, wow, that was dangerous. I can't believe they allowed me to drive a car. You know, it was not a good situation until you realize how good you feel when you do get sleep. And so, you know, this is my diet, my sleep. Those are 2 things that I fight for every single day that are non-negotiable, because the hours that I'm awake are amplified. My productivity during the rest of the day is so much better that it's worth it to take that time and do those things. Dr. Mark Bubbs, from his book Peak, talks about sleep being the ultimate performance enhancer. You know, how much would each one of us pay to make 20% better decisions? Well, the answer is, you know, that's free. We can sleep and do it the right way. But some things to know, you know, it takes 2 to 3 nights to recover from 1 poor night's sleep. Lack of sleep suppresses our immune system. So that's a compounding situation. Not only am I making maybe poor decisions, I'm also risking getting sick and having to miss time, not only, you know, maybe preparing, but also practice or games. If you get less than 7 hours of sleep, you are more than 3 times more likely to get sick. So that's if you're averaging that. You know, it's so important for every aspect of our lives to get that amount of sleep. What are some things that may keep us from, you know, sleeping as much as we should? Caffeine consumption. One easy fix is to keep your caffeine consumption early in the day. Alcohol raises our heart rate and disrupts our REM. You know, I wear an Apple Watch while I sleep, and that tracks my heart rate overnight into a sleep app. So if I have, you know, 1 or 2 drinks, my heart rate is on an average 10 beats higher for the entire night. So the way that works is, when alcohol is present in our body, there's no storage mechanism for alcohol. Our body has to burn that off. And so, you know, a lot of us, we may want to have a drink on the regular at night, especially during quarantine. I get it. But if I have, you know, 1 or 2 of those bourbons on ice, you know, my heart rate is going to be spiked. It is going to impact my sleep that night. And ultimately, if I do that regularly, it's going to make a big difference on things like my immunity, my decision-making, and other things. And then, you know, some things that you hear a lot about: blue light, phones, laptops, tablets, they disrupt your REM cycles. It's best, if possible, to put those things down 2 hours before you're trying to go to sleep. You can't do that, I understand. Maybe that's the only time you can get some work in. The blue blocker glasses are fantastic, and they do a great job of helping with that as well. You know, a couple areas that we all understand the benefits of because of the nature of our jobs, but are so important for us as well. You know, exercise. You know, why don't we exercise as often or as much as we could? You know, we have a lot of excuses. We're tired. There's not enough time. It's not a priority. Our cardiovascular health is dependent upon exercise. Getting that heart rate going in short bursts, whether it's a high intensity intermittent training or lifting weights or, you know, any of those kinds of things. So all kinds of benefits. And again, I'm kind of preaching to the choir on this one. But if we're going to do what's important before we do what's urgent, taking care of ourselves as coaches is going to be very important to our overall mental clarity, to our energy, to our self-image, to our improved immunity. It's a great way to model to the groups that we're leading that we know what it is we're talking about, because we're doing what it is we're asking of them to do. But it's contradictory. A benefit of exercise is typically not weight loss. Our weight, specifically, our body mass index, is going to be dictated by what we eat more than what we do. And as coaches, we don't have 2 to 3 hours a day to be doing marathon training and high volume exercise. The exercise we need is going to be 20 to 30 minutes body weight or strength training, maybe a little bit of running here and there, maybe a pickup game with our coaching staff. But we can't exercise enough and consistently enough to impact our weight. Our weight's got to be controlled by what we eat. Our exercise is going to determine our fitness, our bone regeneration, our muscle density, and those things that are going to not only help our longevity, but also help us on a day-to-day basis. I think learning is such an important aspect and a habit that has to be a part of our day as leaders. A growth mindset is an understanding that intelligence can be developed. The average CEO, and those guys are just as busy as we are as coaches, is reading 60 books a year. It's a recognition that there's answers to questions that we don't even have yet. There's information that we are not even aware of. We don't know what we don't know until we start learning some of these things. But as a coach, I would encourage you to read about all topics: leadership, business, health, productivity. You never know where your next message to your team is hiding. Reading in season is extremely important for me because it helps me to create a new message, maybe not even a new message, but a different way to provide the same message from a different story or different perspective to our team as that topic gets a little bit redundant over the course of the season. Reading has been the number one reason that my life has improved and changed, and I'm not anywhere near where I'm capable of being yet as a person or as a coach. But it all has hinged around a commitment to reading and exposing a world of information that I had not previously been, involved in that much. And so, I think that's a extremely important aspect. I think all of us need to develop a personal flywheel. We're all an N of 1 experiment. So identify the priority of habits that make your next habit easier to accomplish. So when I talked about it for myself, when I eat well, I'm more likely to get a good night's sleep. When I eat well and sleep well, I'm more likely to exercise. When I've done both of those things, I'm most likely to read that day as well. Reading doesn't always make the next things happen for me. This is kind of the order that works for myself. Those things for me provide some fulfillment. They provide joy, perspective, humility, and they improve my ability to pursue these things that I've identified as important in my life. And so for each one of us, I think that it's important that we dictate and determine the order of things that need to happen and prioritize those things and fight for them and make them non-negotiable to the point where we are enabling ourselves to be at our highest performance. By setting out a vision, a dream, by creating commitments and adjusting that, and by getting our group to move in the same direction, by continually working to improve myself as a leader. We had an entire community get behind us in our pursuit of winning a championship. And on the last possible opportunity, we were able to do that this past year. We finished second in the league each of the last 2 years. Indiana Tech right there in Fort Wayne won the regular season. We were fortunate to win the conference tournament, which fulfilled the promise that we made. But I would say this, even if we had not won this conference tournament championship, making that dream, putting it on paper, making the commitments to change would have been worth every second of it, even if the result had not been the same. And so, we're busy making a new vision for our program. I'm busy making some of those things for myself and the commitments that it takes. I'm pushing myself beyond my comfort level by doing things like this, by sharing. The purpose of sharing, while I hope it helps somebody out there, I learned so much by putting this together and crystallizing and making my beliefs more concrete. And so, I challenge any of you guys to do the same thing for yourself, do the same thing for your program, regardless of how it actually turns out. Once we made that promise within our team, we did not publicize that. We did not share that with the other coaches and the other teams in the league. That was internal. That was something for us. I encourage all of you to push yourself in the same way, with all, and make it your own. But that's kind of my presentation. So I'd love answer any questions that anybody may have, and spend as much time, talking as you guys would like.
Yeah, so a question from me is, I know that was a great presentation, first of all. I learned a lot. I'm sure everybody that will listen will learn a lot too. Aside from coaching, what's the biggest thing you've learned in life, period?
Wow, that's a good question. I think that the most important thing that I've learned is that the more I focus on myself and what I want, the less happy I am. And the more I focus on the people who I'm really supposed to be focused on, my wife, my family, my players, the more I focus on serving them, the more fulfilled and more genuinely happy I become. And that's a dangerous trap that I fall into all the time, is like, okay, I've put all my effort into other people. Now it's time to really focus on what I want. And every time that I do, bad things happen. So that's a lesson that I learn way too many times, is just the importance of focusing on what's really important in the service of other people.
Okay. Thank you.
Yeah.
Kind of to go along that same line, we have a question from the audience. What do you know now in your coaching career from when you first started, kind of about on the mistakes that you made? So what were kind of some of the bigger mistakes that you learned from most?
Yeah, I think the biggest mistake that I ever made in coaching was focusing on the results. So I tried to weave that into the story a little bit, that, we had built our program around the fundamentals of process and doing the right things, but then really thought that the next step was to focus on winning, to focus on the results, to hold our players accountable to production and outcomes. That was by far the biggest mistake that I've ever made in coaching. And it had a multi-year effect. That focus on outcomes set our program back for 4 years. We went on a downhill slide for 3, and then it took us 3 years to build it back up. And so the thing that I've learned is it's always about developing culture. It's always about the process. It's never about outcomes, and it's never about winning. That creates an atmosphere that makes it possible to win, but there's no guarantees that it can happen. There's a lot of external factors that are going to determine, the actual success and outcomes. So to me, that's been the biggest lesson learned. And I'm lucky that, I've been at a place where I've been able to maintain my job through those seemingly catastrophic mistakes. At a lot of places, you don't have that luxury. If we went from a conference tournament championship to 11 wins, a lot of times you'd be let loose. And so that'd be even a harder lesson to learn.
Awesome. I'm going to run back through some of the books you mentioned throughout the presentation, and then see if you have any others that you've been reading recently. So we got Victory Machine, Sacred Hoops. I got that one somewhere in my parents' house in a box. I did read it. I did read it. We got 11 Rings, got Essentialism. Peak was another one about nutrition. Was that about nutrition, coach? Or
yes, it's a performance-based book. So it covers nutrition, all the habits of performance for sure.
Awesome. The other one I had down here was Deep Nutrition. One question I had for you. So you kind of spoke about, how, winning and losing games, it's almost impossible to not let it affect your attitude. But are there any routines or rituals, whether pre-game or post-game, that you kind of developed to try to kind of come back to center?
Oh, that's a great question. I think a valuable tool is, the idea of breathing, and, whether you call it meditation or whatever however you define that, but just gaining an awareness of your thoughts can allow you to pause between the moment of reaction and doing something. And that's something that, I think is very important. But the biggest thing is just over time of reminding myself that my value isn't coming from the outcomes or the results, and you know, that the most important thing is how I treat other people. And I make mistakes with that all the time, and sometimes it's the pain of making that mistake again that's the best reminder. But you know, I think that finding quiet time, finding solitude, you know, practicing prayer, and I would define prayer as the conversational side with, you know, God, in my opinion, and finding time for quiet and or meditation where you're allowing yourself to listen. You know, not that you're going to hear an audible answer to your prayers, but that you may find the answer within your thoughts and give you some direction. I think that those are important, you know, aspects of each of our days.
Awesome. So other than the books we mentioned, is there any other books that you have?
Yeah, I'm a big fan of the author Joshua Medcalf. His books, Chop Wood, Carry Water, Pound the Stone, I think they're excellent, not only for ourselves as coaches, but for our players. His other two books, he's got one, Burn Your Goals, which is where the title of that you know, section came from. Another one called Hustle. He's got one that he's working right now that is coming out pretty soon that I've had an opportunity to kind of preview, which I think is fantastic. You know, one thing that I try to do for all my books is keep a note section on my iPhone, so that at any point I can go back through and find some of the quotes or almost do a reread of that, you know, that book. But some of the more influential ones, you know, you mentioned were Phil Jackson's stuff. I thought was really good. Tools of Titans and the podcast of Tim Ferriss, I think, is an excellent resource. Michael Gervais's podcast, Finding Mastery, is an excellent one. The book Legacy and Culture Code are two really good leadership books. Principles by Ray Dalio. Let me see what else. As I scroll through some of these, you know, you mentioned Essentialism. I thought that was a fantastic book. Two, you know, a couple that I've read recently. There's a book called Good People. It's Anthony Chan. Just an outstanding leadership book that I think really emphasizes the purpose of leadership. I would recommend that. That's probably in my top one or two leaderships books, in addition to one on self-awareness called Insight by Tasha Urich. Those two were really challenging, and that's probably why I enjoyed them so much, because they really forced me to look at things a different way. And then I'm currently working on Dare to Lead by Brene Brown. She a fantastic author. Victory Machine was very entertaining. That was about the rise and fall of the Warriors, and I did glean some information from it, but that was definitely more of a fun read than even an educational one.
Awesome. This I got one more question for you, but this has been super powerful and phenomenal presentation so far. As far, you know, I've done self-experiments, whether it's like different diets and different stuff like that. Intermittent fasting I've done as well. But I was kind of doing some research about, you know, sleep cycles and, you know, circadian rhythm. Have you done any research on like alternate, you know, sleep patterns or any of that kind of stuff?
I haven't myself. Everything that I understand about sleep is centered around the circadian rhythm, you know, that when it's dark, you should try to go to sleep. But I don't know much about like alternate sleep patterns. You know, what I base most of my thinking off of is, you know, if as humans have been on planet Earth and there's all different perspectives of how long, but for the majority of time, we didn't have some of the modern technologies. How do we put ourselves in the most natural environment that we possibly can? So, you know, before there was electricity and all these things, people would go to sleep when it was dark. They would get up when it was light. So how do we recreate kind of the nutritional approach that those people would have taken? You know, obviously I'm not spending my day hunting and gathering, but can I eat in a way that would maybe mimic what those people would have done? And then can I sleep in a way that would be as close to that as possible? So, you we try to make our room as dark as possible, as quiet as possible, eliminate the lights and the noise and the distractions. But I haven't done much research into anything, alternate. And the way that we play, we don't leave time zones very much. And so we don't have to account for going West Coast to East Coast to, Central Time. So for us, it's all pretty simple in terms of, adjusting for time zones, and we don't really have to do that. But I'd be interested to know anything that you've been looking into.
Just kind of been cursory research so far, but
maybe we can chat on that at another time.
I could send some stuff that I found, but I think Coach Roush has a couple questions as well.
Great.
Yeah, Coach, this has been awesome, and I really appreciate you doing this. And I kind of find myself on the same path, and this is really encouraging to hear. So thank you very much. I'm curious, and forgive me for being inarticulate because I'm kind of just thinking this through. But how do you discern between the idea of non-attachment and ownership, right? Because one thing is you can't control everything. However, I'm also going to take responsibility for everything.
Yeah, what an awesome point. There are these conflicting paradoxes in our life, between idealism and pragmatism, where, idealism says this is how I wish it would be, and a pragmatic leader says this is how it is. So those are always in conflict with each other in terms of settling for, how things are today and how I want them to be. So that's an incredible balance that we have to make in that one specific example. And it's the same balance between non-attachment but ownership. Ownership is I'm accountable for everything, whether I control it or not. And I think that the ownership aspect, it never allows a person to be a victim of their circumstances. While you may not be in control of the majority of that event, it forces you to find the small areas that you could influence and work toward changing those aspects of it. So, the outcome of a game, it's largely outside of my control as a coach. How does a player shoot that day? What calls does the referee make? But if I can isolate the 20 things that I could have done different and work to correct those for the next time, now I'm taking ownership without attaching to the outcome. And the attachment says like, I'm a good person because we won, or I'm a bad person because we lost.
Mm-hmm.
Right? I'm trying not to value myself based on those things because, I've done that countless times.
Sure.
I feel great, we won. I feel horrible, we lost.
Right.
Ownership for me personally is more saying, these are the decisions that I made that impacted the outcome, and how can I correct those or maybe do those better in the next time? How can I be more prepared for that situation? What was my message and practice leading up to this game? Were we accounting for, the situations that could arise? And I think in every time that we lose a game as a coach, we can find
absolutely
at least a couple things that we feel we could have corrected or done better without making that so that, I'm just incapable.
Right.
It's where's the opportunity to learn from this.
Absolutely.
And I think we can take that level of ownership in every single thing that happens in our life.
Yeah.
Our relationships, our, whatever it is, I think we can find the areas that we do have an impact on and work to better ourselves in those areas while still recognizing that the majority of the event is actually outside of our control.
Right. That makes sense. And then the books question was going to be another one I was going to ask. I know this is kind of small rock for you, but I am curious, where are you leaning towards for your next vision? How will you put it? Is it another 4-year plan, or, what are you thinking for that?
Yeah, we're shooting big. I don't want to necessarily broadcast that. I think it's a very internal, but I am a big believer that if you don't give yourself that next very uncomfortable step, that we all have the ability to fall into complacency. And so, we reset what it is that we want to do next very quickly and very aggressively. And it's terrifying to me that we've even said that among our coaching staff. And But because I can truly say, looking back, that I would have been really proud of our progress as a program, even if we had not won a conference championship, I'm comfortable to make this next step, knowing that even if it doesn't happen, pursuing it is even more important than accomplishing it.
And I think maybe that was my question, is if you are going to tag some success-based outcome to a vision.
Yeah, I do think that's important, because if we're too general in terms of what it is that we want to do, I'm not sure that it can really push us in the direction that we want. Now, but again, I think the paradox of that is I'm not going to feel like a failure in my own eyes if we don't accomplish that. I'm only going to judge our effort and intent. And did we do the things that we were supposed to do and needed to do to try to achieve that? And if it doesn't happen, then we can identify the reasons why and pursue it again, or change course.
Right.
So I do think that we have to have some level of clarity and decision of what it is that we're pursuing. But again, not necessarily identifying our own selves with that thing.
Right. Yeah.
And I know that those two things are kind of in conflict, but
it makes a lot of sense. Like it drives you what you want to do, right? It's your North Star, and whatever happens along the way, some of it we might not be able to control, but we're going to make our decisions and execute our habits based on where we want to go.
Yeah, exactly right. Because if we really didn't care at all, then we would just live in kind of a vegetative state. I'm not pursuing anything. I'm not attached to anything. For me, that doesn't sound appealing. So it's what can we do to push ourselves beyond what we're capable of today? But again, try not to identify with that actual outcome, just with how can I better myself so that this is possible.
Love it. Well, thank you very much. I'm good, man. Thank you.
All right, awesome. I know I'm going to go back and watch this a couple times. Jeff, did you have anything else for Coach?
Nope, that is all.
Well, we really appreciate you taking some time and sharing this stuff. I find this much more valuable than like the strategy and stuff. So especially self-improvement, anyone can relate to this. So thank you again.
Yeah, my pleasure. I can't thank you enough for the opportunity. It's a topic that obviously I'm very passionate about because it's been transformative for me, but also I understand that by extending myself in this way, it's forcing me to even make my views more concrete in my own mind. And so, I learned as much by preparing and presenting this as maybe any of you guys could learn from my doing it. But I appreciate the opportunity. And if there's ever any way that I can follow up on a future conversation or have more of a dynamic conversation where you guys are telling me where you're at with everything, I would love an opportunity to do that. But I really appreciate the time and the platform and, look forward to a future conversation in any way that we could have one.
Most definitely. This will be up, probably tomorrow. But if someone wanted to, reach out, how could they get in contact with you?
Yeah. Email address is my first initial last name. So nemenhiser@madonna.edu. I'm on Twitter, is probably the best way to get in touch with me from a coaching perspective. I'll even leave my cell phone number if anybody would like it. It's 734-430-4032. So I'm accessible and I'm here to help in any way possible.
Awesome. Thanks again. We'll talk soon.
My pleasure, guys. Take care. Enjoy your weekend.
Bye, you too, Coach.